Never going to happen.
Now I've ruined that since I've mentioned it.
Right. Where are we?
Right, we are live.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna bring it up. But okay, yeah. And then go to the Telegram. Post it in Telegram.
Pop out the.
Go to the Discord. Paste the live stream there. So did you like that spice knot I posted a couple weeks ago?
Disturbingly fantastic.
Right?
Yeah, that was quite a mashup. That guy did a good job.
Good old times of the day.
Hey, Norbert.
I know, but.
I just be 1 more minute. I will fetch some water.
Sure.
Setting up my screen real estate so I can see everyone and see the chat.
I still got to get a better monitor. This 22 inches running out of space in a hurry.
Yeah. Get an old TV. Somebody's giving one away somewhere.
Oh, no doubt. At Walmart, you can get a 70-incher for $600 right now. 4K.
Oh.
That's a lot of money.
I paid $1,000.
I remember when the 42-inch screens first started appearing in the early noughties, and they were about 10 grand over here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's what the giant 8K TVs cost right now.
Yeah, give it a couple of years, they'll be $600 too.
Right? I'll get them broken and try and fix them.
There you go. Just needs a new power board, Joe.
You know, it hasn't worked so far, but I'm going to keep trying till it does.
Might as well.
But you know, I've gotten some pretty good deals on some free TVs. I mean, the one with the bad HDMI board that all I had to do was get like a $15 adapter to component.
Oh, yeah.
And that was for a 60-inch TV.
Oh, nice. Can't beat that.
Cool. Right, are we, is Norbert still there?
Yeah, I think he said he was getting some water.
Ah, right, okay. So I was going to say we could start getting Audacity up and running.
Audacity. I knew I was forgetting something.
It's not crucial.
Is it not?
Audacity.
Yeah, Audacity.
Check and make sure it's listening to the right mic.
Record the show with.
Yep. Okay, it's using the correct microphone.
Alright, Joe. Got the golden pipes all warmed up for the...
Cough, cough.
It is. Me.
There was one point yesterday where I thought I was losing my voice.
Oh, no.
I thought, oh no, got podcast tomorrow. Can't lose my voice.
Well, I don't think we're going to have any trouble getting the innards long enough this time. We all have phones that we love to talk about, so...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, very good. Okay, Audacity.
I've got to decide whether to
Vibrations from the ether.
what to do with me other two old phones.
Are they unlocked?
Do you mean to network or
The bootloaders.
bootload? Oh, I always unlock stuff.
Oh, good.
I go into develop. That's one of the first things I do when I get a phone is go into developer mode.
You're braver than I am, Tony.
And turn on USB debugging.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, we got three.
What in the live stream?
No, for feedback.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Give me a few minutes. Okay, Larry Murphy. I have not read Larry Murphy's, and it is a jumble.
No better time than the present.
Well, we'll read it when we get there, I guess.
You bet.
And I don't know who all he sent it to. Oh, no, just us. Because he's talking about Destination Linux.
Okay.
All right. That way I threw an app and checked this out that I've never used, but there was nothing in there, so I thought it looked interesting.
Technical question about the news. Is Muffin the window manager for Mint?
Yeah, it's
So
a
is it-
fork of
is-
Mutter.
Mm.
So we've got Brad Alexander.
And William Wesley. William Walsley.
I've got a Larry Murphy on.
Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I have Larry Murphy's there.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just one giant paragraph.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. I'll figure it all out. It just looks like a jumble. And I haven't read Williams yet. Oh yeah, I just read Williams right now, and that's interesting at least. Not that nobody else's was interesting, but this one is interesting.
Was that directly to you, or was it directed at?
Actually, this was to me.
Yeah, I was going to say because I can't see that one. I've just got Larry and Brad.
I didn't realize that. With the forwarding, it's, I have to actually look. All right, added in. That should be everything, and I'm assuming it's just going to be us four.
Yeah, I think so. Should we do Audacity?
Oh no, I need to install on this.
You need to install Audacity.
Yeah, because yeah, I'm
All
mainly yeah.
right,
Uh-oh.
it's obvious. It's obviously a long story. Just
Oh, to be fair, at this point, I will talk about it. Okay, I will talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. My volume was way too high on my mic. It should be fixed now. I don't know why it
I
keeps
also did
resetting
it.
to 100.
That sounds good.
Some apps just do that because, for example, I was using Zoom
Test.
and it constantly kept resetting my microphone volume.
It's annoying. I have it set to a specific place for a specific reason. I don't like blowing out everybody's eardrums. It looks like I need to come up just a little bit. And Discord kind of makes corrections for that, so I don't want it messed up everywhere else. So let me bump it up to 85. Test, 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 test. Okay, not
That's all right.
85. 83, that'll do it. Much better. Okay. Now I'm not redlining. Alright, I guess I should look and see. I'm sure somebody's already telling me what's wrong with the audio. Hey Londoner, how's the audio today? I'm surrounded by midgets.
Oh, Londoner says we all sound good. So
Okay.
Microphone test, and it's working.
All right.
Hey
So
Piojit.
we're all good.
Clean my glasses.
right, I shall.
Maybe actually be able to see the screen.
Right, Audacity. So you've got it installed now, have you, Norbert?
Yep. Is my volume acceptable?
Sounds good in Discord. Maybe when you flash up Audacity, just see where it's
Yeah.
going on the
The monitor, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because like Joe says, Audacity tends to compensate automatically for
Well,
highs and
Discord.
lows. Discord, sorry.
so right now, as I'm talking in a reasonable voice, it doesn't go. It barely went above -6 for a brief split second, so it should be good.
Yeah, you're fine. Like I
Yeah,
say, I
for
don't
those.
have mine set that high.
Mm-hmm. It's just distorting because when I start recording, the waveforms on the screen are not very high, so it's a bit.
Okay, shall we
But it sounds good.
do the 3, 2, 1 record and the silence?
What's that then?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone ready?
Ready?
3, 2, 1, record. Cool.
You gotta love it. I'm in here in the living room alone all day, and then it comes time to do the podcast, and all of a sudden all the midgets show up.
Right. Okay, ready for 3, 2, 1, 0?
Ready.
3, 2, 1.
Zero.
Zero.
Cool.
Tony, you don't have your line in the greeting section.
Pardon? I didn't
You
get
don't
that.
have your greeting line or
I see
whatever
it.
it's supposed to call.
I don't have what?
It says hi, this is Tony, and then it's blank.
Oh, I haven't got anything in the show notes.
Um,
No.
yeah, sorry.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Let me. Let me. Okay, we're ready to go, Joe?
I am.
Mhm.
Yeah. Everyone else ready?
Ready.
Leave it to the
Yeah.
boss.
I'm just going to change the line about my wanderings in the intro.
Do you want me to wait?
Mm,
It's only a couple of seconds job, isn't it?
I liked
Okay.
my wording on that.
oh, sorry.
No.
Oh, no.
There
I
was
mean,
a specific
it's
reason for my wording
perfectly,
on that.
it's perfectly fair. Yeah, it's perfectly fair.
Because I want
Because
everybody to know that you run Arch and you're telling us all about
I don't run Arch. It's technically it's in the OS. So
it. Which is Arch.
is your
No, we run
yes,
out.
but yes, but it didn't. I didn't do. I yeah. Is your wording still fair? You think?
Yeah, no, I think it's good. No, Endeavor is still Arch. It's like, when I say, I'm running Garuda, I'm really saying, hey, I run Arch and you should know it.
Yeah.
No, it means hey, I'm running a bloated version of Arch that I didn't take time to set up myself.
Oh.
Well, that's true. That's true because,
Come on.
my
Come
time
on.
is valuable.
Let's
Yes, but
have this
it's also true if
conversation.
you.
Right.
It's also true that today it doesn't really matter because you have enough RAM.
That's true.
It's time to start the show.
All right, let's quit talking smack about Arch and get on with it. Oh, wait, you're waiting on me. All right. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. I'm Joe, and it's starting to get cold here again.
Hi, I'm Tony. This is Tony, and I'm boosted.
Seeking the fountain of package availability. No. Again. Seeking the fountain of package availability. I'm Norbert.
And now with 17% more verbosity, I'm Josh.
And this is episode 374. This is episode 374.5, recorded on Sunday, the 14th of November. Livestream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at mintcast.org. First up in the news, Linux Mint Monthly News. Firefox 94 is released. SteamOS announcement. System 76 desktop announcement. Intel has been doing this for a long time. And NVIDIA released a fix. In security, a Dutch newspaper gets hacked. Azure is vulnerable. Who would have guessed? AMD and Intel have more security flaws. Then in our wanderings, I work on an Xbox. Josh remodels a bathroom. Tony gets a new phone. And Norbert tells us all about Arch. In our innards section, we were originally planning on doing LPIC, but that fell through, so now we're going to talk about the phones we've had in the past. Yes, it's a backup topic. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. First up in the news, Linux Mint Monthly News of November. Does anybody else want to cover this, or do you want me to read through it?
I think it's just reading through because you've got all the salient points there, Joe.
Okay. Bug fixes to Mint 20.2 and LMDE4 for CJS, Cinnamon Screensaver, Muffin, Cinnamon, Nemo, XApps, Mint Report, and Bulky. One of the fixes in Muffin caused a regression resulting in games running away way over 60 FPS to experience system lock. That is still being worked on. Upcoming versions of Xed and XReader will feature an option to hide the menu bar. Pressing the Alt key will temporarily make it visible again. Xed also gained the ability to switch between open tabs using Control Tab and Control Shift Tab. System Reports tool will check to make sure that the system has been user merged and warn if not. LMDE4 will no longer use Firefox ESR and will track the standard version that Mint uses.
I think that last one about LMD DE4 and Firefox is probably the most interesting because we all know Debian uses the ESR of Firefox, so it's interesting that the Linux Mint devs have decided to move away from that. Now, I'm not sure why, because LMDE tracks Debian and is supposed to be quite a stable version. Anyone else got any thoughts on that?
Yes, but you also have to remember that Debian. Yes, but you also have to remember how Debian is supposed to be super stable. So even if you are using a testing version of Debian, it will be still fairly stable. So because of browsers tend to move very fast, I don't think it sounds unreasonable for them to move from the ESR version, because what comes to my mind is MX Linux, which I talked about in a previous show, and the maintainers of MX basic, and what the and what the maintainers of MX do is they take a couple of very popular packages and have the latest versions of those in the repo, and everything else comes from the Debian stable repo. So I think if LMD is moving towards a similar direction, it could be a good thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and although it wasn't in the blog, just to add to the Linux Mint news for this month, they've also added kernel 5.13, up from 5.11.
Ooh.
So anyone with newer hardware or you need some features in the newer kernels, that is available now.
Okay. And Firefox 94, the release we've been waiting for? And in this, using about unloads will release system resources by manually unloading tabs without closing them. Linux features improved WebGL performance and reduced power consumption. Site isolation was introduced to better protect against side channel attacks such as Spectre. Multi-account containers now have Mozilla VPN integration, allowing each container to use a different server location. By default, it will no longer warn you when exiting the browser or closing a window, resulting in fewer notifications.
That last one's good.
Yeah, fewer notifications is always
get
good.
really off with all these pop-ups saying, "Do you really want to do this?"
Oh.
Right, and I think this is just an overall excellent update for Firefox. They've been getting slammed pretty hard lately for being kind of superficial on the changes, and that's still present in the 94 release. They added some more accent colors and such, but this is a really noticeable difference. I felt an immediate improvement in speed on a couple of the web pages. They used to render a little slowly, so that WebGL performance seemed to have really been noticeable. And just to double check, I got onto Discord, and Leo had also reinforced that, said a couple of his pages that he'd visited had also been more snappy.
Yeah, also the improved WebGL performance to reduce power. That's good, because let's face it, the majority of people these days, if they've got a PC, it tends to be a laptop, and they're not tied to a wire. So anything that improves battery life's got to be a good idea.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the performance. Yeah, Yeah, I think the performance improvements are the biggest thing in this update. But after that, what I'm most excited, what sounds the most exciting, what sounds the most, but after that, what sounds the most exciting for me is the VPN integration in the container tabs. I started using the container tabs a few weeks ago, and my one complaint about those is that if I set a website to always open in a container given is that if I set a website to always open at a given container, and I even if I have syncing even if I have syncing enabled, and I go to my other device, it doesn't remember. So the it being an extension means that's it. So I think it being an extension means that it doesn't remember my settings from one device to the other. So if they maybe I'm doing something wrong, but if it really isn't a maybe I'm doing something wrong, but if it indeed doesn't have this function, that would be a great addition. And the reason why this the and the re- and the reason why this VPN integration sounds really exciting for me is because I I would really like I would really like the convenience of having of being able to browse a website in a during to be able to browse a website with a VPN on and not having to spin up a virtual machine for it. Because what I've been doing is I would is I have a virtual machine and another distro running XFCE in it, and I set the XFCE window manager to not have any borders. So when I maximize the browser within the virtual machine window, it almost looks like it was a native browser to my system, only that on the window decoration says a VirtualBox and not a Firefox. So if this was implemented, I could route some of my internet traffic through a VPN and not have to rely on a virtual machine to have other websites coming in without a VPN.
Have you tried Docker for that?
No.
Well, I
Sounds
use
like I should.
yeah, I use Docker for that, just for using specific VPNs, and I can set up multiple instances of each if I want to. But I have a Docker VPN, and then I have a Docker version of Chrome, which only uses internet through that VPN. So if the VPN's not up and running, it doesn't have internet access. I don't know if Mozilla, the VPN integration per tab has been, looked over to see if there are any errors, or, peer reviewed to see if there's any leakage, but I prefer my way.
I haven't tried the Mozilla VPN yet. I've been using another one. Maybe I should give it a try before I try before I even try to set it up before I even try to set up the container tabs with it. Has any of you tried or used the Mozilla VPN?
No, not yet. I'm still paid up on my current VPN provider for another year or so, but when that runs out, I might give it a look.
Okay. Valve says SteamOS 3.0 will be available for everyone to download and install. Valve yesterday held their Steam Deck development live stream on YouTube to share more details on the upcoming Steam Deck gaming handheld and the SteamOS 3.0 operating system it's running. During this, they announced that you will be able to download the ISO of the Steam Deck for your own hardware. Now, I find that interesting just because, it's another operating system for Linux out there, and I'm just wondering what the benefits are for running this. It's probably a stripped down system, tweaked towards gaming specifically, so I assume that might be a little better than just installing Steam on a regular desktop, but I'm not sure.
The other thing is it'll already be installed in the ISO. You won't have to go off and find the Steam client and all that. It's going to be there by default, isn't it, in the OS?
Yeah, and
so everything should be set up to work with Steam OS. So your audio and video and everything.
Not necessarily, because like NVIDIA drivers and things like that, they're always going to be, changing, and who knows how well it's actually going to work. Or like hybrid drivers, I doubt that they've accounted for every type of hybrid driver that there is. So
But this is Arch, and Arch gets updates as soon as they're available.
Yeah,
I
but
just I just did a kernel update to 5.15, 10 minutes before the show on this laptop,
yeah.
with EndeavourOS, and I think the SteamOS um and I think the SteamOS repositories must be and I think the SteamOS repos will hold back packages because it wouldn't be stable otherwise, because I'm pretty sure the NVIDIA drivers don't work properly yet with the 5.15 kernel.
I'm also curious to see how they handle Proton in this. Will it be configurable like it is in the Steam client, where you can select your version, go back to previous?
Well, it's going to have to be. And for a lot of their games, you're still going to have to use the Proton beta version. So,
Well, we're not going to find out until the spring because actually the first Steam Deck doesn't come out then. So I imagine they're still going to be working on the operating system until the actual Steam Deck starts getting released.
And if SteamOS itself will be available, I think it has great potential to become the go-to gaming distro for
I
people who haven't gotten into Linux yet, and they are looking for a distro specifically for gaming. Because right now there's Garuda, PopOS, and Manjaro, I think, which are the more popular ones. And Garuda and Manjaro can be a bit overwhelming because Manjaro was my first distro and it actually broke a couple of times because of updates.
well, you saw what happened to Linus when he tried to install Steam on PopOS.
Yes, but to be fair, when you install distro not using a net installer, so it installs packages from the ISO itself, the first thing you should do is do a system update, which he didn't do, at least not on camera.
Yeah.
So it might. I'm not sure if it would have prevented it, but at least now it's fixed.
Yeah, and he did go straight for the command line instead of using whatever inbuilt there is for PopOS. But
No,
moving
he
on,
did use the pop shop. He tried to use the pop shop, which failed,
uh,
and
then he
then used the
tried
command
to.
line, which had the same issues because the pop shop is just a front end for app, as far as I know.
Okay, moving on. System 76 is building its own desktop environment, not based on GNOME Shell, replaces current Cosmic Desktop, primarily written in Rust. GNOME extensions are a sandy foundation to build on, not ideal. And here's a quote. There are things we'd like to do that we can't simply achieve through extensions in GNOME. Extensions in general feel like a hack. And what we want to do with our desktop differs from GNOME. So it's not like the option to merge Pop Shell and Cosmic into GNOME Shell would be a welcome thing. And that's from Michael Murphy. And yeah, GNOME definitely feels like, it's kind of kludged together.
Except when you don't have any extensions installed. I tried to do that
Uh,
for a week on Fedora. It's actually usable. The one thing you sorry, it's actually usable. It's actually very usable. The one thing you really need to have and it doesn't have is tray icons. But if you're on a laptop with a touchpad, it's really usable because then you don't have to. If you want to open the overview with a mouse, you go to the hot corner and you go back, and you and then you hope, and then you have to go back to the bottom of the screen where the dash is. But I have installed extensions ever since. I have installed a couple of extensions since, but I try to keep the number to a minimum. But I try to keep the number. But I try to keep the number to a minimum. But the thing is that I really like vanilla GNOME itself, but I also like what Pop does. But I also like what System 76 does with their Cosmic Desktop. And it sort of feels like when you have two dogs and you love both of them very much, but they hate each other. But they keep fighting with each other. So I think I think PopOS moving away from GNOME is a great thing for PopOS itself. Because
Right.
the only proper way, because it seems like the only proper way to embrace GNOME is to embrace vanilla GNOME, as for example Fedora does, which I also which is and Fedora and as sorry, and as things are going, Fedora might actually become my daily driver in a couple of months, because it actually saved me a couple of times.
Well, I think there's been quite a a lot of information coming out about this, and I'd say that the tension in the air is palpable between System 76 and GNOME, and it was going to come to a head at some point, and it looks like that's happened, and they're going to be moving on.
Okay, and in further news, Intel celebrates 50 years of their 4004 microprocessor. On November 15, 1971, Intel publicly debuted the first commercial single-chip microprocessor, the Intel 4004, with an advertisement in Electronic News. 50 years later, here's a look at its legacy and how the 4004 stacks up against a modern Intel powerhouse. And we have a link in the show notes, and you can check that out.
Yeah, I thought this was quite cool that Intel didn't actually release their first processor until after the Apollo program had virtually finished. So what does that say about the computing power of Apollo?
Right. Yeah, it was an interesting read, and to see how far we've come in 50 years, it's really quite incredible. From the process nodes to just the performance, it's quite incredible. It's a good read.
Yeah.
Okay, NVIDIA 470.86 Linux driver released with VRR/G-Sync fix. 495 driver series is as their new feature branch series with GBM API support. 470 driver series continues to serve as their production branch version. 470.86 fixes a variable refresh rate G-Sync regression that prevented DisplayPort and HDMI 2.1 variable refresh rate. G-Sync compatible monitors from functioning correctly in VRR mode. There's the new option, TAC no TAC peer mem, for not installing the NVIDIA PeerMem kernel module. Peer memory kernel module is around GPU Direct RDMA peer memory support. This module, when paired with systems having a Mellanox InfiniBand host channel adapter, can allow peer-to-peer read-write memory to the NVIDIA GPU video memory. This is for GPU computing scenarios, but if you aren't deploying to such servers and not concerned about this peer memory capability, the kernel module can now be skipped over with ease.
Good job on that one, Joe. That was a mouthful.
It really was.
Especially,
I didn't understand half of what you were saying.
Especially since, it was being written like right before I read it.
I wanted to make it easier because I realized how horrible my wording was on that. So it would have been even worse. But does it sound like NVIDIA is trying to appeal more and more to average Linux users?
I'm all AMD, so I can't weigh in on that one.
I don't know about that, but
I use
can
both.
anyone get an up-to-date modern card at the moment?
No, not really.
Breaking the bank.
Right, that might be the biggest problem.
I'm running a 960M here, so yeah, not really.
Well, I'm on NVIDIA. It's a 1060, 3 gigabyte, and I really don't want it to break down anytime soon.
Yeah,
I've been using it for years.
The 1060,
sorry.
The 1060 to 960, definitely not modern, definitely still usable.
And it's perfect for my use case because I don't game. I just edit videos.
I do game, and it works fine. Well, for most games. I had a problem with like Watch Dogs 2. But
I looked at some secondhand AMD GPUs, video cards that are supposed to be on the same level as my NVIDIA card, and even those were kind of unreasonably expensive, even the used ones. So,
yeah, GPUs right now are excessively expensive, but for the sake of moving
GPUs might be. And it might be the same for CPUs in the near future.
All
because of
chips.
a new cryptocurrency, of course. Because of a new cryptocurrency, of course.
Okay, moving on to the security update. Dutch newspaper accuses U.S. spy agencies of orchestrating 2016 Booking.com breach. From
I don't
the
even remember this.
Yeah, I don't remember it either. The register, jointly U.S.-Dutch owned Booking.com, was illegally accessed by an American attacker in 2016, and the company failed to tell anyone when it became aware of what happened, according to explosive revelations. Do we know anything more about this?
No, we've got a link in the show notes to the full article from the register, but yeah, it's obviously an old story as far as the hack's concerned, but they're starting to lay the blame on the US to a certain extent. So.
Well, just because it was an American attacker, I don't know why they're specifically saying U.S. spy agencies.
Yeah, that's what I can't understand, because it named one particular individual in the article,
Right.
which for legal reasons I won't go into. I'll let register stand that.
Yeah. Okay, and moving on. ChaosDB InfoSec bots could pull anyone's plaintext Azure Cosmos DB keys at will from Microsoft admin tools. Does it surprise anyone that there's security flaws in Azure?
No.
According to the register, an astonishing piece of vulnerability probing gave InfoSec researchers a way into Microsoft's management controls for Azure Cosmos DB, with full read and write privileges over customer databases. The so-called ChaosDB vulnerability gave Wiz researchers access to the control panel of the underlying service that hosts Azure Cosmos, Microsoft's managed cloud document database service, they said.
So do we know if this has actually been fixed yet, or is this telling the world about it before there's actually been a security update?
I'm not sure. I doubt that there's a fix yet.
We should put up a board that we should put up a board that says weeks without mentioning Microsoft in security update. I don't think
Never gonna happen.
No, see, there's the issue right there.
I don't think we've had such a week since we joined.
C#. Okay, AMD reveals an epic 50 flaws. 23 of them rated high severity. Intel has 25 bugs too. From the register again, Microsoft may have given us a mere 55 CVEs to worry about on November's Patch Tuesday, but AMD and Intel have together topped that number with fixes for their products. AMD alone revealed 50 new CVE-listed bugs this week. 23 of them rated high concern, meaning they're rated at between 7.0 and 8.9 on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System.
So are these hardware bugs rather than software bugs?
If they're coming out of AMD and Intel, I have to assume that they are.
Yeah. So how do they tend to fix them? Because if you've got that hardware that's got the bug in it, do you have to get rid of the hardware, or is there a software fix to,
with all the ones from
negate
Intel,
the vulnerability?
Yeah, with all the ones from Intel, there were those patches at the at the processing level that really slowed things down, but then fixed the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it had to be done at the kernel level, and I believe Linus did express a bit of displeasure towards Intel regarding that.
Oh well.
So yeah, I kind of assume it's going to be the exact same thing there.
Yeah. More things to slow everyone down.
Yep.
Hooray.
And now on to the wanderings. This time in our bi-weekly wanderings, I fixed an Xbox 360. I finally took apart the two red-ringed Xboxes and found one with a BenQ DVD drive. That was in really, really good condition. So I performed the driver board swap between that one and one of the Xboxes that simply had a bad drive. It now works perfectly. I wish the other one had also had a BenQ, because the two that I have that need drives both need the BenQ. Well, the one now needs a BenQ. I also looked into modding the devices and that I have, and the other one, like I said, also needs a drive, but I will need to order some hardware for that to happen because there's a couple of different ways you can mod it, but it all requires some hardware in the middle to exploit the security flaws in the system or to emulate the DVD drive itself, but then be able to use like a USB thumb drive instead of an actual DVD. My son really enjoyed helping me take apart and put back together those drives and enjoyed watching me do all the soldering to move the wires over for the driver board. Now, not this last week, but the week before, I was on vacation and I was planning on getting, all kinds of projects done and everything. But I spent more than half of that vacation extremely sick and not moving much. And it really felt like I just wasted that vacation time. Like 4 of the 5 days, I was just miserable. But I did get a replacement for my chair in the garage. The old one was getting extremely uncomfortable. It was older than like all of my children. I know that's, kind of a boring topic, but I hate it when that happens. I dropped down to the other Wi-Fi again and it's causing a problem. Give me a second here.
I'm about to do a lot of beeping as I mess with the oven.
Okay, that should fix the issues with YouTube in just a second, I hope. Yep. All right. I got a replacement for my chair in the garage. I know it's a slightly lame topic, but I really enjoyed it. I was able to get a theater-style recliner for free. From what I've been able to find, this is a $550 to $600 chair when new, and it is an electric recliner. And it's got 2 cup holders and 2 grounded plugs in one of the arms, as well as 2 low-power USB ports for charging. That being said, it was not really in that great a condition when I got it. The metal struts and the undercarriage that support the legs were all bent out of shape and missing some of the bolts that hold it together. I was able to pull those off and bend them into the correct shape and get them back into the correct positions and add some bolts so that they held there properly. But after that, I found out that the power cable was broken, so I had to fix that before I could test the electronics. That was actually a pretty easy fix, requiring a bit of solder and some heat shrink. But the power supply for that portion was also shot. Maybe it got shorted out or something when it got crushed and broken. So I ordered one of those for $13 and it started working just fine. The chair also comes with a detachable table and other things that can be hooked into it. And I have one of the tables, but I would like another one for the other side for keyboard, mouse, whatever. The replacement tables, though, cost like $55. So I tried to design one of my own. I was able to make the assembly part that the tray mounts into and put a bolt into it so that I could add things, but the board that I had was way too heavy. So what I tried to do was design a new mount that would fit in the oversized cup holder. The design was dimensionally correct, but the table was once again too heavy, even for the 2 bolts and the wider mounting position. I am looking at other boards that I could use for that at this time, because the board that I was using is polyboard and it does not do well being cut. So I can't just cut it down to size to make it lighter. It's gonna fall apart if I do that. There are also some other things that can go into that same mounting bracket that you can buy online, including a tablet holder that sells for like $62 and a wine glass holder that sells for $58. I'm not interested in those prices and I don't need a wine glass holder. So I'm going to design and articulate and assemble what will be used as a camera mount. I have some phone mounts that are designed to work with full-size camera tripods. Actually, I did design it, and it would hold the correct size bolts to attach the phone mounts, and it works very well. I actually used it on, I think, last Saturday's show. The way I designed it allows me to control the angle that the phone sits at, but I think that I'm going to add an extension arm for more height and versatility in positioning. This articulated arm attaches to the cup holder adapter that I had made before, and I'm also thinking about using the second mounting hole that's there to attach another arm that would hold this microphone right here, but this is an extremely heavy microphone, and that makes it difficult. I also added some headphone hangers on the side next to the wall that were 3D printed. I think this was a really good use of that space considering the number of headphones that I have and the number of headphones that I work on. I found a design on Thingiverse for an 18650 power bank. I have several of those 18650 batteries that are older but sitting around and doing nothing. So I ordered several of the boards that go along with it and started printing. I probably ordered too many of the boards, but they're cheap and I will have more batteries in the future. Those boards don't output the highest amperage, but they're useful for smaller projects, like the flashlight that I converted to USB for my bike, for when I go biking in the evenings. I printed these using glow-in-the-dark filament, mostly to use up the roll, but also because it's really cool. Josh, what have you been up to?
Well, I threw away my old bathroom. With the remodel now complete, I began the cleanup process, and I had 2 heaping pickup loads that I took to the local dump, and that took care of most of the larger waste, so now I have to get my back patio into shape again. There's still a lot of smaller debris scattered around. And then a couple of days of high winds here in California resulted in some sections of my fence failing. I repaired what I could, but some of the sections were too rotted and I had to tear them down and also haul them to the dump. So it looks like I'm going to have to put in a call to my homeowner's insurance to get this fixed. I did a nuke and pave on my ThinkPad X220 and installed MX Linux 21 over MX 19. I found the installation went really fast and everything seems to be working fine so far. I transferred all of my data over and I plan to dig deeper into the OS this week, but so far it looks like a really solid upgrade. On my desktop, I upgraded from the 5.4 kernel to the 5.13 on Mint, which is the latest they offer. And there wasn't really any drama to speak of. Everything's working and appears stable, which is the calling card of Mint, so no surprises there really. Started to look for a tablet to replace my trusty but long in the tooth LG G-Pad X as it's slowed down considerably lately. So with some recommendations from Joe, I've started to scour eBay for a replacement. I don't need anything too fancy, as it's just going to be used for content consumption, like streaming movies and that type of thing. So
it might also be good to get some ideas from Norbert, because he uses a wider variety than I do, since I only like things that can be converted to Linux specifically.
Right, yeah. And it could be an Android tablet if necessary. But yeah, that's about it for me. How about you, Tony?
Oh, well, yeah. As Joe alluded to earlier on, I decided not this week, last week, that I needed a new mobile phone. The one I was using was a Huey P20 Lite. I bought that off our old host, Josh Lowe, just before lockdown a couple of years ago. To replace my smashed up Nokia 6, which had a really broken screen.
I'm sorry, could you say Huawei again?
Huawei.
Okay.
Did I not say Huawei or
You
Huey or
Huey.
whatever?
Yeah, okay.
Huey. Well, that's the way it's spelt.
But Huawei is that you shouldn't overthink it. It's I almost said, I wanted to say it's spelled as it's written, but of course it's just a Romanification of a Chinese word, I guess. So it should be Huawei, I think.
Right. Anyway,
Huawei.
that's what I was using. Yeah. I'd got that originally to replace the Nokia 6 that broke, but the P20 was stuck on Android 9 and hadn't had any security updates since the end of last year. I think it was around October, November time. So I would have probably had a go at putting Lineage on it, but there's no official image for that particular phone at the moment. So I decided, and also it doesn't support 5G. And although we haven't got 5G around here, I thought I'd upgrade to a 5G phone. So I decided to go back to Nokia, and I bought a X20, which is absolutely massive compared with the P20. It's got a 6.67-inch screen. Comes with 6 gig of RAM. There is an 8 gig one available, but mine's got 6 gig. 128 gig of internal storage. Has a dual SIM tray with the option to use 2 SIMs or a SIM and an up to a 112 gigabyte micro SD card to expand the internal storage, which I think would be fantastic for most people. I'm thinking of ordering a 256 meg one, gig one, because they're reasonably priced at the moment on Amazon. Like I say, we haven't got 5G around my area.
Never order micro SD cards online. Always get them in person.
Ooh.
Never.
Oh, I've never had any problems off Amazon in the past.
But maybe it's the difference of the side of the pond that you're on. But I don't even trust Amazon anymore when it comes to micro SD cards.
All right. Okay. I shall think about that. I haven't dropped it. Press the button yet. So I can have a look what prices are like in our local big box store and see if they're compatible.
But I also have a Micro Center close by, and that's a great place
Yeah.
to buy micro SD cards.
Yeah, the store that we used to have locally, they went bust. So I would have probably gone there because they were a good store. But the other big box store around here that does that kind of thing are Dixon's PC World, and I'm not very. I don't necessarily have a very good experience when I go in there.
Oh, for what it's worth, Tony, I've ordered all of mine off Amazon, and I haven't been bitten
Nah.
yet.
Yet.
You're right.
So anyway, I'll probably get one at some stage. I've got a 16 gig one in there at the moment just to test it's working, and everything's working at the moment. So I've been living with the phone for just over a week now. I got everything set up. That was pretty painless, as most things were backed up to the cloud via Google. So all my contacts and stuff like that were easily restored. I needed to reset a few accounts, obviously, because passwords to my banking app and things like that I still needed to put in when I reinstalled those. But the only thing I didn't like about I've found that I don't like about it at the moment is the default clock app. There's a quirk in the way it does alarms, and I'm not very happy with it. So I still use that as the clock app, but I've replaced it with I've got a new alarm clock that I've set up that I can use for using it for alarms, because I tend to have a couple of alarms set during the day to remind me to do things. But apart from that, so far, the only other thing I've done, I went out and bought one of these wallet cases for it with the tab that clicks over. So hopefully, when I do drop it in the future, which I will, and I already have, it'll give it a bit more protection because it's a fairly thick, sturdy case. And it gives me the advantage I can keep a couple of cards in with the phone just in case I forget my wallet. So that's good. Moving on to other things. 10 days ago, I had my COVID booster jab and was under the weather for several days. So I didn't join the Saturday show last week because I was still feeling grotty. But that seems to have eased up now, and even the ache in my arm's gone now. So in about a week or so, I'll have the full benefit of having had the booster, because they say it takes 2 to 3 weeks for you to get the full benefit of the vaccine dose, or any vaccine dose, before your immune system picks it all up. So that's good. Yesterday, I went out with some family members, met up with one of my cousins who I'd not seen for over 40 years, which was great. And we ended up having a long chat and exchanging what had been happening in our lives over the last 40 years, which was quite interesting. I got some sad news. I learnt a mother, my auntie, was in hospital with dementia, as the illness is quite advanced, and she was starting to have violent outbursts. And her husband, my uncle, couldn't cope with her anymore because he's in his mid-80s. So that's really sad. But I suppose that's one of the disadvantages of getting into your 80s, that these things happen. And finally, I think I might have found a Linux PC box that I'm considering buying. I was looking at Entroware, but the particular machine that I was thinking about getting was a massive tower, and they've not got it in stock. But Leo, a while back, got hold of a second user Lenovo little microcomputer box with a AMD Ryzen in it, one of the older generations. But Juno Computers, they sell on your side of the pond as well, but also over here in the UK, do a Brutus 5000, and with the configuration that I want it, it's got an AMD Ryzen 9 5900 HX, and I've spec'd it up with 32 gig of RAM and a terabyte NVMe SSD, and it's working around 1,400 quid, which is about $1,800, which looks like a fair deal to me. Obviously, it hasn't got a dedicated graphics. It's got onboard graphics, but Leo's, when I was talking to him, said the Lenovo box with the older chip was really good for for the kind of graphics that I'll probably use it for. So yeah, I'm thinking of going for that. It's got HDMI and DisplayPort monitor outputs, so it should be good for a dual display at some stage when I get around to getting a new monitor as well. I can use this monitor and whatever new one I get. So yeah, I might go for that. It'll save me a few quid on the other system and save me a bit of space on my desk as well, which is always a good thing. So that's my news for this fortnight. So what's been happening with you, Norbert?
Well, these past 2 weeks for me were quite uneventful. I guess times like that do need to happen sometimes in a person's life. I mostly had, but I did have a noteworthy experience that related to both Linux and university. So these past months, I decided to keep around something Arch-based, always on my laptop, specifically for having easy access to numerous obscure packages that I need for university, which worked out well for the most part. But one day I was in a class where we needed to use a visualization software, which I really should have installed the day before at home and made sure it worked. But I may have become overly confident in the AUR. Someone in that same class who uses Debian mentioned how he needed to install dependencies manually for downloading them. Someone in the same class mentioned that someone in the same class who uses Debian mentioned that he needed to install dependencies manually by downloading them from packages.org. So I thought an AUR helper should take care of all that, especially because I successfully ran that same software a couple of weeks before, but for this class we needed a specific fork of that software. So in the middle of the class, I opened the terminal and started building it from source. via Paru, which is my AUR helper of choice, and the installation which finished successfully, but then the thing wouldn't work properly. Finally, sorry, I have a sore throat. Finally, I gave in and rebooted into Fedora, which I installed on the laptop the day before, almost as if I had sensed that I would need a backup distro. I downloaded the RPM package, which conveniently was available for the program. Sorry, I hit my microphone. Which conveniently was available for the program from the developer's website, and installed it via DNF. It went without a hitch. It even pulled all the dependencies it needed from the repos, as opposed to allegedly on Debian when it wasn't the case. So it was a case of the RPM being easier to install than the deb file, which was the nicest surprise I had since I started using Fedora. Then a week later, I needed another package, which I could only get from the Debian repos. So at this point, I just decided to always keep around a deb-based distro, an RPM-based distro, and something Arch-based. And I think this is a somewhat reasonable middle ground for maximizing package availability, because between Debian Arch and Fedora, I think I can get anything. And even if something goes wrong and I quickly need something, I could always just reboot to my other distro.
So that means you're going to be triple booting, are you?
Quadruple booting actually. Quadruple booting, because I still have my Void Linux installation, which I keep around because of its low memory usage and how smooth everything is. So
Cool.
I'm torn between these 4 distros. And no, Joe, technically I am using Arch, but not using Arch itself.
That's splitting hairs, that is.
Yeah, you're using Arch.
Yeah, it's interesting because I started on Manjaro, then I moved to Arch, and I really liked Arch. But the thing about Arch is some Arch users are very vocal about how they use Arch. No surprise. And that sort of elitism made me at one point that sort of elitism sort of started making me feel a bit bad about using Arch, which now that I think about it doesn't make sense, because just because there are some people among Arch users who see themselves as elites doesn't really mean I have to feel bad about using Arch. And when I tried EndeavourOS a couple of months ago, I decided to stick with it because I tried it because of some NVIDIA driver issues, which seem to have so I initially tried EndeavourOS because of some NVIDIA driver issues that I couldn't work out on Arch itself, and it seemed to work better on Endeavour. And when I thought about it, and I didn't really see any reason to move back to Arch, because Endeavour gave me all the customization I needed. So I didn't really need that.
As we say many times on this show, use what works for you. It doesn't matter whether it's called Arch, Endeavour, Debian, whatever. If it works for you, that's the OS you should be using.
Look, I give people a hard time about, telling us all about running Arch, but if Arch works, use it. I mean, I like Garuda Linux, but like you said, it's bloated. But I have more than enough RAM to run it on all my systems.
It isn't bloated because, let's be fair about Garuda. It's a performance-based distro, and if you have high enough specs in your computer, it really doesn't matter how much RAM it uses or how much CPU it uses, because unused RAM is wasted RAM.
Yeah.
And there was a short period of time when I thought about using EndeavourOS as sort of an anti-elitism move. I'm not sure it makes sense, and I'm not sure if there are many people who move from Arch to Endeavour, but I actually did an Arch installation on my computer to see that if I can sort those NVIDIA issues out. I still didn't seem to have done it, because there's a package called GNOME Shell Performance in the UR, and there's also Mutter Performance, which I couldn't find for any other distro. So I thought that could improve the NVIDIA issues, but then Mutter Performance failed to build for some reason. So I may have to look into the chaotic AUR for that.
Even Arch users are soft. If you really want to get into Linux, try Linux from scratch.
Yeah. And now I did after a while I did nuke that Arch install and just stick with Fedora and Void. So I'm not really multi-booting on my computer, but I do have to stick with both Fedora and Debian for my laptop as well as Endeavor. So because I don't really want to be in a situation like that, because I managed to launch the software by the end of the lecture, so I couldn't finish my work. I have to do it at home. So yeah, it's better safe than sorry. Also, some people have like 8 to 10 distros on their computers. And I think that's all I have to say. Other than distro hopping, I kind of been sickness hopping as well, because it's been a random month since I recovered from COVID. But now my sense of smell still hasn't recovered. I wouldn't even say it's 50%. It's somewhere around 50%. But a few days ago, it started to get worse again, and I had a little panic about it. But it's just a cold, thankfully. But it's annoying because this way my olfactory cells can take a break to recover properly. And I think that's all I have to say for today.
Okay, on to the Linux innards. Okay, no, go ahead.
That didn't go as smoothly as I planned.
No worries. It came out fine.
I've been coughing a lot off microphone.
Worry less about your mistakes and worry about flowing into the next thing.
Yeah.
That's the only thing there. But now in our innards, it's all about our smartphones of the past and things we've had and whether or not those phones are still usable. So this is a backup topic. Yes, we had something much more Linux-based initially, but that fell through. It happens sometimes. Now we get to talk about smartphones, something we all love to talk about. My first smartphone was a Samsung Behold 2, and I hated it. And not necessarily because it was a bad phone. Yeah, it wasn't that great. I think it was like Android 2.2 or something. Or no, Android 1, and then it was supposed to get the upgrade to 2, which was one of the selling points when T-Mobile was selling it. And then Samsung changed their mind and decided not to give it the update, and that really bothered me. And then, I tried to get T-Mobile to do something about it, but they wouldn't stand by the product that they sold. So whatever. But after that, I had the HTC Dash. Now, I can't remember if it was a Dash. I think it was a Dash. And I think I also had the Dash 2 for a little while, which was a BlackBerry knockoff, but it was pretty awesome. And that one was running Windows. So I had moved away from Android for a little while, and I was using Windows. And yeah, it was a candy bar style, and yeah, it didn't have a touch screen or anything like that. Still very useful, still very cool. It did have web browsing, but it definitely was not that great. Now, after that, it wasn't very costly at the time, but I ended up getting and there might have been some phones in between. These are just the memorable ones for me. I got the HTC HD2, which is the most modded phone ever. And it was just really awesome being able to put whatever operating system on there that I wanted. Basically, the bootloader was unlocked and everything was available. It started out as a Windows Mobile 6.5 phone, I think, 6.0, 6.5, which was like when Windows Mobile started not being as good. And then I believe it did get the update to 7, which not really a fan of. And then I think it missed out on 8, but somebody created a mod for it so it would run 8. The other thing about that phone is that the base operating system came with the Transformer movie. Transformers, I believe it was the first movie, might have been the second movie. It's a long time ago. But that phone, like I said, it came with Windows Mobile, but almost immediately someone came out with a way to install Android on it. And also a way to install Linux on it. And I believe it went all the way up to like Android 7.0 that they were installing on it. And then somebody got like Windows NT or 98 or something running on it. Ubuntu was running on it. Windows RT was running on it, the tablet operating system. So was the last development I really saw on it was all the way up until 2016, and that phone came out, I think, in like 2009. But it was a great phone. I used it until I really couldn't anymore. It was really a hardware limitation. The 500 megabytes of RAM, which was the maximum, was really that cutoff there for me. It just got to be slow and unusable. And then after that, I went back to Samsung again and had the S3, which is a great phone. And if you can still find one that's working, it still is. It still has its uses. My son is currently using one now. I used that phone until it died. I've had actually several. They're smaller devices, but they ran well and did everything I needed. It's still good today as an MP3 player, and my son also occasionally uses it for Wi-Fi calling and messaging. He plays a couple of games on it. Granted, it's a much older version of Android, and I haven't gone on to XDA to see what other operating systems are available for it, if there's a more modern operating system for it. And I'm not overly worried about it considering what he's using it for. I'm not planning on putting it on a network or anything, and he just uses it over Wi-Fi, and it's really good for that. And if I needed a separate MP3 player as opposed to my phone, I'd probably get something like that and just put a large micro SD card in it, whatever the largest is. I think 128 gig or something. But then after the S3, I got the Note 3, and I used that for a really long time, and that was a great phone too. Still had the user replaceable battery, which is why I kept it so long, because after that, all the phones started coming out, and you couldn't just, swap out the dead battery for a charged one right away. And that was a big problem, at least for me at the time, and the fact that a lot of them were moving away from having a micro SD card. Now, the Note 3, I did usually I'll use a phone for a while before I mod the operating system, but that one, 3 days after I got it, I modded the operating system. I put a custom operating system on there specifically because at that time, Google had made it so that you couldn't access the micro SD card directly with the stock ROM. So I replaced the ROM and was able to use it the way that I wanted to for audiobooks. And that's why I did that with that one at that time. Really good device. I ended up giving that to my daughter, and I think it's still sitting over here somewhere, and it's kind of falling apart after all this time. It doesn't like charging through the port, but I was able to get a one of the little cards that you can slide in the back and hook up to the ports back there so that you can charge it wirelessly. And then, it still has the micro SD card slot, so that's useful. But I think the 3.5 millimeter jack on that one is going, but it is an extremely old phone. The screen's still good, but it's a little jittery on how it runs, but it kind of got put through the ringer. And then after that, I got the S7, and now I still use that for some things. I still have it, but the ports are getting a little bit old. The 3.5 millimeter jack doesn't work, and the USB connection is a bit wobbly. But I will use that sometimes with Droid Cam and just use that as my webcam instead of using a regular webcam, because a lot of my webcams are older and it just works better. It is really good for that. It's not the greatest camera, but it's still better than what I have. And it's still a really good working phone, and it's also my backup in case something happens to my Note 10 Plus, which is what I currently run, and I love the Note 10 Plus. It is, it's not quite as top end as a lot of the Notes from the past with all the bells and whistles. I mean, it doesn't have the VR options or anything like that, which they stopped doing right when the Note 10 came out. But it does have 256 gig of internal memory, which I think is the lowest that came in that series, because the highest was like 500 gig or a terabyte or something. And it will take, I think, up to like a 2 terabyte micro SD card, which I don't even think there's any on the market right now. But a 1 terabyte micro SD card would be fine. But I haven't needed to put a micro SD card in it at all because I have not used up the 256 gig that's in there. And that's much more stable than a micro SD card that, I would go out and buy and put in. So I'm quite happy using the internal memory for that. And really good phone. Nice size screen, looks good. I probably will upgrade one day. Maybe it won't be to the next Samsung. Maybe I'll try out something like the one of the gaming phones that comes out with like insane specs and active cooling, and it still costs $1,000 less than a top end Samsung phone. Because the Fold 3, which is nice looking, is $2,000, and that's a big nope for me. So now my kids have used a lot of S3s as well. Going back to the S3, still, like I said, I think you can get those for like $30 to $50. If I were traveling overseas or something, and I was worried about taking my regular phone with me, I'd buy an S3. I'd buy a SIM card while I was abroad, and I'd just use that and be perfectly fine with it for whatever time frame. And then when I got home, it'd become an MP3 player for one of my kids or something. So a lot of really good devices in the past, and that's not even bringing up, like, I know yesterday we talked a lot about PDAs. My favorite PDA of all time still has to be the Dell Axim X51V, but that came out with, the good version of Windows Mobile, which was 6.0 and below, or 6.1 and below, or something to that effect. And I just loved the back catalog of applications that you could manually install and find for the entire Windows Mobile ecosystem. And that was incredible. And then 6.5 just made all of that obsolete. But that's really all I've got, unless you guys got any questions about any of that. Tony?
I was just going to ask, because I'm going to be talking about it in a minute, have you tried Ubuntu Touch on any of those over the years?
No, I do have that Pine phone, and I will probably try to put Ubuntu Touch on that. But no, I have not put Ubuntu Touch on... No, I might have actually put Ubuntu Touch on the HD2, but that was I don't know how long ago that was. That was an extremely long time ago, so it would have been an early version of Ubuntu Touch, and I don't remember it working that well.
Okay. So, I first got into the smartphone owning sphere back in 2013. I had a play with a smartphone that someone gave me, a very, very early Google phone. It was only a 2.5-inch phone. I can't remember even the name of it now, but it was really old, and it only had 512 mega RAM and very, very low storage. I think it was about 8 gig of storage. So it was it might even been even lower than that, but for some reason I can't remember the name of it, and I know I did pass that on to someone in the lug so that they could have a play with it. But the first one I actually bought in February 2013 was the Nexus 4, and that was a great proper induction into the smartphone experience. But by October 2014, it was starting to feel a bit restricted. I've got quite big hands, and it was a really small screen on it, so I decided to jump onto the OnePlus bandwagon. And at the time, OnePlus in the UK, they were selling their phones at really low price for the hardware spec. I managed to pick up the original OnePlus for £299 here in the UK, which for it was a premium phone at a mid-range price at the time. And I love that phone. 5.5-inch screen, and I think it only had a couple of mega RAM, but at the time it felt really snappy. Storage wasn't anything to talk about. It only had 64 gig of storage, but no expansion, so you had to live with what you got. Couldn't stick an SD card in it. But the disadvantage for me on the network I was using was it didn't have 4G. And when 4G became a thing around about mid to late 2017, I decided to go for a 4G phone that would work on my network. And I bought a Nokia 6. And that was a really good phone. The only problem was I'd not had it very long. I think I'd had it about just under a year, and I dropped it and smashed the screen. And that's when the P20 Lite came from Josh to replace it. Like I said in the at the beginning of the show, but I really like that phone. That was a 6-inch screen. It was a really nice phone, really responsive, 4 gig of RAM. Again, it was only 64 gigabytes of internal storage on that one, but it did have an SD card. You could either put 2 SIMs in it, or you could use one of the slots for an SD card. So I think it went all the way up to 128 gig SD card, so you could expand it quite well. So there was plenty of storage options on that phone. Like I say, unfortunately, it got dropped and got replaced with the P20 Lite, which I've used up until this last week. The P20 Lite, it's a nice little Huawei machine, a little smartphone. Did everything I wanted, came to me rescue when the other one got dropped. And because it was an older phone, it didn't cost me an arm and a leg to get it. But it stopped getting updates. I think it froze at Android 9. And like I said earlier, it stopped getting security updates around about last October, November time. So I was starting to get to the stage where I was a bit worried about security and stuff like that. So I decided, and the other thing was it wasn't 5G compatible. So although we don't have 5G around here at the moment, it will be coming at some stage. So I thought my next phone would definitely have to be a 5G phone. So this week I went back and got myself a Nokia X20, which is I talked about earlier, and it is absolutely huge. But it's got guaranteed updates of Android for a minimum of 3 years, and they're saying in the blurb that it should get all the way up to Android 14 before they stop issuing updates for it. So it's just out. Obviously, at the moment, it's got Android 11 on it because they haven't run out the update to Android 12. I know Android 12 has only just started appearing on Google devices in the last month, so it'll probably take around Christmas, maybe early New Year, before it gets updated to Android 12. But that's great. So I'm looking forward to working with that for at least 2 or 3 years, possibly longer. But with my other phones, the Nexus 4 and the OnePlus One, for a while I ran Lineage on them both. Well, the Nexus 4 actually became my wife's daily driver for a couple of years before she got a Nokia, which she got the Nokia 6.1. I bought it as a birthday present a couple of years ago, and she's been running that happily. And when she gave me the Nexus 4 back, I'd already installed Lineage on the OnePlus One and ran that up to Lineage 16, and then for some reason I wasn't able to upgrade it to Lineage 17. It wouldn't take the upgrade for some reason. I couldn't get it to work. So I actually ended up putting Ubuntu Touch on it a few months ago. And when we started talking about what we were going to do on the show tonight, I actually dug them both out because the Nexus has now got Ubuntu Touch on it as well. and I've been having a play with them the last 24 hours to see how they are. And I actually stuck a new SIM card in the OnePlus. And I've heard people say, "Oh, the phone doesn't work properly" and all that. Well, I can say the phone, it makes phone calls and it receives phone calls, so it is possible to use it as a daily driver for phone calls. Software-wise, Ubuntu Touch is still very limited. A lot of the apps on it are web-based, so you do need an always-on data connection to use a lot of the apps, which obviously limits its use if you're out of Wi-Fi range and don't have a great data allowance on your network. Although that tends to be getting a lot better these days. I've still got the problem is on my network it won't do 4G, but I could put a different network card in it and get 4G on it. But yeah, I've over the years the phones I've had I've really enjoyed using. I think my favourite of the lot of them, even though I've just got this Nokia, I think the OnePlus was probably the one that I really enjoyed the most. And it's a real shame that that technology moves on so fast because and the fact that OnePlus now have made all their phones so expensive, I wasn't able to kind of follow them through and keep with them. But yeah, that's where I'm at with mobile phones. I might talk about Ubuntu Touch a bit more when 2004 drops, because I know they're working on it at the moment. But when the updates to 2004 come, I'll see what the improvements are in it and maybe talk about that on a show at some stage. So that's about all for me. What about you, Norbert?
I've just been thinking about being able to swap the battery to a charged one again. When Joe mentioned it, it would be so great to be able to do that again.
No, for the longest time, that is why I would not move away from the Note 3, was simply because I could take out the battery and put in a new one. I do know why they changed that. Because they didn't want third parties making batteries, one, and two, it's a whole lot easier to waterproof a phone that's completely sealed. So yeah, that's the reasoning behind it.
I would take swappable batteries. I would take swappable batteries above water protection any day.
Oh yeah.
My first ever phone, so not a smartphone, was a Nokia 5110, on which it was so easy to swap the battery. And it would be great, because I don't think I've ever had a smartphone that had a swappable battery. And my very first smartphone was a bit of an odd one, because my last non-smartphone was a Nokia Music because my last not smartphone was a Nokia Express Music. I don't know the specific model, but somewhere around 2010, I made an impulse purchase and I got myself my very first technically smartphone, which was a Neonode N2. It had a whopping 2-inch touch screen. It had no buttons. It was the size of an MP3 player. It had a modified version of Windows Mobile on it, and and the screen itself was a very interesting gimmick. It was a touch screen without being a touch screen. It had a grid of infrared. It had an infrared grid above the screen, so it would be able to sense if you tap the screen. And it was also able to sense which way you would swipe on the screen, but it wouldn't be able to tell where exactly you would tap the screen. So you would have to select the menu entries by swiping up and down and left and right, and you would just tap the screen anywhere to select it, to get into the selected menu. It also had a little joystick at the bottom, next to two holes, which I assume were for harnesses. So it was a really small, tough phone, a durable phone. And when I say it was running a modified version of Windows Mobile, I mean it had a really modified, I guess a sort of watered down version of Windows Mobile, because it really looked and felt like a feature phone, not a smartphone. And it was a very interesting, unique concept, and I just was very curious about it. So I think I only had a few months with it, after which I managed to sell it to someone who was really interested in the same model, and that was when I got my first well, this was a phone where the Neonode was a phone, but not really smart. My second device was smart, but not really a phone because I went back to my Nokia feature phone and I got myself an iPod Touch 4, which was, at the time everyone was going crazy about the Retina display, and one of my friends had an iPhone, and one of my friends had an iPod Touch 3. So I was really interested in that concept, and they were also way more affordable than iPhones where I lived, and I didn't really need mobile data at the time, so I just went with the Wi-Fi only, 8 GB model, so the cheapest model of the iPod Touch.
Now, that was what the nice thing about some of the iPods at the time, the smart iPods, was that you could turn them into like Wi-Fi phones, and you could do Wi-Fi messaging with them. And at the time, I think you could still install Skype on them, and so they were interesting to use, and you could use them like a smartphone.
Yeah, even back then, the main thing I was using any smart device for was listening to music, and it was perfect for that. Until I started experimenting with lossless formats, and I realized how little I could fit of that on an 8 GB device. So eventually, I moved to the Sony Xperia SP, which was my first Android device ever. It came out in 2013, and I bought one in 2014. I had the habit of buying phones that are at least 1 year old. Because that's where the price goes down substantially to a more reasonable price point. And, well, it wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, it was just a phone. It had a 4.6-inch screen, an 8 megapixel camera, 1 GB of RAM, so it was a pretty standard mid-range phone at the time. But eventually it got really slow. And a little more than a year later, or it might have been around exactly a year, and around and around a year later, I made another impulse purchase, which was the Sony Xperia Z Ultra. So I really liked Sony phones at the time. So I really liked the Sony phones at the time, which were the new non-Ericsson Sony Xperia phones. And this was an odd one because the Sony Xperia Z Ultra was a 6.4-inch phone. So it had a 6.4-inch screen, which was way ahead of its time, because nowadays a 6+ inch screen is pretty normal, but this was a 16:9 screen, which meant it wasn't as tall, but it was really wide. And it also had quite big bezels, and I do have it in my hand if you're watching the video version of the podcast, and it's basically a really big brick. But what was nice about this phone is I think it was my first phone that had a glass back, but it's one of the nicest looking phones I ever seen. So it had that signature squared down Xperia design, and it was really big. It was like it looks like you could boil an egg on it, basically. But it was also very thin. And it's not something that sorry. And it's not something you would want to hold up next to your face while making a phone call. But I also managed to get a little Sony Bluetooth Sony Bluetooth handset that was not specifically for this phone, but it was recommended to be used with this phone, because then I would be able to pick up the phone call on the handset, and I wouldn't have to put up this large brick to my face. But it was really useful because at the time I didn't have a tablet, and I was able to learn for my high school final exams on this phone. And then a year later, I got my Samsung Galaxy S2 tablet, the 9.7-inch one, and that was when I realized that I didn't really need this large phone anymore, but I still kept it for around 1.5 years after that. The tablet I really liked because the tablet itself came into the picture when I started university, and I realized how much, and I realized I would either have to go with a tablet or have to print out a lot of materials that we get. because thankfully we didn't really have to buy a lot of books, but we were receiving a lot of PDFs and notes from the teachers. But unless I wanted to print like hundreds of pages each week, it was just very convenient to get a tablet. And I have to say that the AMOLED screen really spoiled me, to the point where after I replaced my Sony Xperia Z Ultra with the Sony Xperia X Compact, which wasn't an AMOLED phone, but I got it secondhand and it had some issues. And I think I think I had it for less than a year. And I think I only used it for less than a year. I ended up switching. I ended up moving away completely from Sony phones because they started to be. Because that was around the time where they started to be not that good, especially the compact phones, which were supposed to be a non-compromise, full-fledged, which were supposed to be a no-compromise, scaled-down versions of the Sony flagships, but their hardware, but they started releasing them with a lower spec hardware than the flagship ones, and after moving away from Sony, I decided to buy a Samsung phone. It was a bit hard to find a phone that doesn't have a notch, because I think I've said before that I don't really use a front camera on my phone at all, so I don't really want to have a notch or a cutout camera just to take up space. And I got the Samsung Galaxy A8 2018, and this was in 2019, so I was still trying to do the buy a phone a year later than when it comes out. And it was a pretty decent mid-range phone. It was when I realized that there's not much point in buying that was when I realized that there's not much point buying a high-end phone nowadays, because the mid-range phones are perfectly usable. They are fast enough, the cameras are good enough, the screens are good enough. So I decided to always just go with the mid-range phones from then on. And yeah, I decided to use it. I decided I wanted to use it at least for 2 years, but that got cut a bit short as I mentioned a few weeks ago. Its screen died, and I didn't really want to pay for another screen, so I went on a used marketplace and I managed to get my current phone, which is the LG G7, or to introduce it more formally, the LG G7 ThinQ, or to introduce it more formally, the LG G7 ThinQ, which I originally intended as a short-term emergency replacement phone, but it sounds so good that I think I want to use it as long as I can, even if I have to replace something, even the screen or the battery, because not being able to replace a battery at home doesn't mean that it can be replaced, I think. So I think Josh can also tell you a lot about using an LG phone with a dedicated high quality deck. Ironically, for some reason, there's a bug that prevents this LG phone from playing the absolute highest master quality tracks on Tidal, but everything, even the 360 MP3 or a lossless FLAC, sounds really good on this phone with this deck. So it's not just about being able to play high bitrate audio, it's about the conversion itself. And this is my first phone that has a notch on its screen, so I managed to avoid these notches for around 4 years since they first appeared. I still mainly use my phone for listening to music and podcasts and audiobooks, so I decided it was time to abandon my ideas of not using a phone with a notch. And that's what I am today.
Has it still got a 3.5 millimeter audio jack in it, or is it Bluetooth?
Because you can only take advantage of the built-in deck via a jack.
Yeah.
And I don't think. So I decided to give in to the notch. But I don't think I would want to give in to a phone that doesn't have a 3.5 millimeter jack. Because
that's the advantage of the Nokia that I've just bought. That's got a 3.5 millimeter audio jack.
all these phones that don't have the 3.5 millimeter jack, yes, they're very annoying, but they're definitely not the first to do this. I mean, Apple was not the first to do that. Samsung was not the first to do that. The first one I can remember that I owned was the HTC Dash, which you had to have a mini USB adapter to hook up a 3.5 millimeter headphone on.
Mm. Yeah, well,
Well, it
like
doesn't
you
make
say,
sense to me. Well, I guess it makes sense for some phones to not have a jack because some things like wireless earbuds are getting more and more popular. But I don't think I would have. I don't think I would be. Maybe if my ears weren't so sensitive, I would try. I would try those earbuds. But there's a, there's a saying that once you go headphone. But there's a saying that once you switch to headphones, you don't. But ever since I switched to headphones, I guess I haven't been looking for good enough earphones, but I really don't have any intentions to go back to earphones. Maybe if I think this phone has support for one of those high quality Bluetooth audio standards. So maybe I will get Bluetooth headphones. So maybe I will try to get some Bluetooth headphones, but I'm perfectly okay with having to use a wired headphone. With having to use wired headphones. I both at home and on the go.
Yeah,
And yeah, so
I like the
basically
option of being able to hook up a headphone to my system that doesn't require a battery, that doesn't require me to have something else that's charged. So if my Bluetooth headset dies and I don't have anything else handy, I can grab something that's wired and just hook it up.
So yeah, my phone is basically a very fancy music player with internet capabilities that I can sometimes use for making calls.
Yeah, I do remember those candy bar phones that you were talking about right at the beginning, with the controls on the side specifically for audio playback for MP3s. Yeah, those were awesome at the time. Josh, how about you?
Well, my initial foray into the world of smartphones were all lower tier devices, which were using air quotes here, free, with the signing of a contract, and usually those were of the 2-year variety. So, really not so free.
yeah, you usually paid for them about 3 times over with the extra charges.
Yeah, subsidized phones.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think all of them were single core too. Yeah. And they were all terrible, and that's probably why I can't recall any of them specifically by name. I did get a phone at one point that had a dual core CPU in it, and it just felt like grease lightning compared to what I'd had prior. But it still wasn't very good. I'd say my first real noteworthy smartphone was a Nexus 5, which came out in 2013, and I got one in early 2014. And I found it to be a really impressive device for its price point. And I still have it today as a backup phone. As a matter of fact, it still functions, although it now runs Ubuntu Touch in place of Android. I've had to replace the battery on it once, and it does suffer from the all too common power button issue that causes it to constantly reboot, which is why I eventually moved on from it. But still, probably one of my favorite devices of all time. Even if the build quality was a little bit shoddy in some spots, it's been quite long-lived. It also had Lineage on it at one point. From there, I decided I wanted to focus more on privacy, so I went through a number of flip and feature phones, only to find most of them ran stripped-down versions of Android, or I think I had one that ran KaiOS, which was the continuation of Firefox OS. But the lackluster performance was maddening, and just attempting to text caused the system to lag, and you'd have input delays, so keys that you pressed hadn't shown yet, so you'd press the key again, and then all of a sudden you'd have a screen full of jumbled mess in front of you, and yeah, it was not fun. But there was a bit of nostalgia returning to T9 predictive text from the earlier years of smartphones, or feature phones, I should say.
Have you tried the new version of the Nokia 3310? It came out, I think, in the last 5 or 10 years. So in my brief experience with those, I think Nokia has very good. I think Nokia has really good software for their current feature phones.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. I did see that they'd released it,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's
I think it even has things like Google Assistant while not being Android itself. Or maybe it is a watered-down version of Android, I'm not sure.
that could be. So, after that, I decided to return back to the world of smartphones, and I purchased an LG V30 Plus off of eBay. And Norbert, as you were alluding to earlier, uh, it's primarily because of that LG Quad DAC that came in a series of their phones. I got it at a very reduced price due to some screen burn in, but the phone was pristine outside of that, and it's still my daily driver today, even though the OS hasn't received a security update since August of 2019. It's still on Android 9, but the DAC is still considered by many to be the one of the best, if not the best, put in a phone, which is why I'm reluctant to replace it. And also, like Norbert, I use it mainly for listening to music, podcasts, audiobooks, and I just try to store as little personal data on it as possible with, the security patch level being out of date. Yeah, so that's the current daily driver. And I also purchased a PinePhone UB Ports Edition when it came out. And I have a Sony Xperia X, and both of those run Ubuntu Touch. And I did that with the hopes that one of them could serve as a privacy-focused daily driver. The Xperia is probably the closer of the two, well, undoubtedly the closer of the two, but you still have to sacrifice a fair amount of convenience. Compared to Android, that is. And the PinePhone really remains little more than a developer's toy that cannot be daily driven under any realistic circumstances. Unfortunately, it seems like the reality of a capable Linux phone is still quite a ways off into the distance. The hardware's there, unfortunately, the software is definitely not. And that's really the history of my phone usage.
Can't really argue with that. Yeah, everything I've seen about Linux on a phone for purposes of using it as a phone doesn't seem to be there yet, and just a lack of development. Now,
Yeah,
for go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you really, really do want to use an Ubuntu Touch, and you want to give the UbiPorts developers a bit of support, go and bung them a few quid to help them develop some more software for it, because that's the only way they're going to get, it's going to become a daily driver, is if they get, the resources to be able to develop software that will go on the phone.
That's a great point, Tony. And I actually did that. I joined their Patreon, and I was on there for a little while. I'm not donating currently, but I do eventually plan to get back to giving them some money. I hope to. I think in terms of Linux on the phone, they're probably the closest to developing an operating system that's usable at this standpoint. So hopefully they can get there sooner rather than later.
Now,
Yeah,
Paul
it's just
Paul just asked on the chat on YouTube, why would you want to use a Linux phone as a phone? And my response to that is you use it also as a phone, and it's so you don't have to carry multiple devices. And for privacy.
Right. Yeah, for privacy, absolutely. I think I saw that there was a study done showing that Android sends back something like 20 times the amount of data to Google than Apple. So that's a little disconcerting, and it should really wake us up and prod us into that direction,
Yeah.
Paul's answer is fine, use it as a soft phone app and run your asterisk server. It has its possibilities.
You could also send smoke signals
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to ask, mainly for the listeners, maybe we can get some feedback on this, is what do you do with the retired phones that you've got?
I have
Do you
kids.
put them to any kind of use? Do you use them as video cameras? Do you use them like we've talked about, use them as audio players, whatever?
Now,
But it'd be interesting to know what the listeners use their old phones for.
me
And do they
personally,
use them as development machines to try out things like Ubuntu Touch and stuff like that?
I have used phones as like nodes for BT Sync. I have used them for security cameras. The problem with using phones as like security cameras or dedicated cameras or anything like that is that they're not made to run those cameras all the time. So, you get a couple of days running under their belt and bad things can happen. They can burn out pretty easy.
Paul in the chat says give them to the kids, which is what you mentioned,
Yeah.
Joe, or Wi-Fi cams.
Yeah,
You can use them as webcams, yeah.
I've used them in conjunction with I think it was called IP cam, IP webcam.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've used that, and then you just use it as an IP cam to check on a specific area of the house or something. And it was useful, and I think with IP webcam, the nice thing about that is it only activates the webcam when you're actually looking at it, which is a good thing. So it's not on all the time. Now, with the LG V30 Plus, Josh, have you looked at XDA to see about updated ROMs?
Yeah, and it looks like there's an unofficial Lineage port up there for it, but I'm always a little leery about unlocking the bootloader and going through the process. I'm not really
I
keen
have
with phones.
I have bricked phones in the past, but
Yeah, I have as well.
yeah, the HTC HD2, because of the different versions that came out, it had a whole bunch of different radios. It was pretty easy to grab the wrong version of the radio and completely brick the device and not be able to do anything with it. So yeah, that happened at least once, maybe twice.
Yeah, and if
Yeah, I've
there's
got
a
a-
wrong version out there, I'll find it.
Yeah.
I've got a BQ here, BQ5 that I bricked while I was fooling around trying to flash it.
Right. If this wasn't my daily driver, I'd probably give it a try. But I still enjoy the phone too much to do that to it.
Yeah, understandable. But if it
Also,
ever
not
gets
sure
to
if
that,
any of the custom ROMs for these LG phones support have the proper firmware for the deck itself.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that.
I'm willing to use this. I'm perfectly willing to use the factory ROM as long as I can have this audio experience.
Well,
Same here.
Norbert, what
So-
do you use your old phones for? The ones that are decommissioned?
Well, this, I think the Z Ultra is in the best condition. So this is my backup phone, which I thankfully didn't need for the past 2 years. The SP is just, it just hangs around at the bottom of the drawer because it's not really worth to use for anything. And the X Compact is the one that I bricked by trying to flash it. So
Yeah, Paul in the chat saying he's turned an old tablet into a ham APRS node and for other ham tools. That's quite interesting.
So the two small phones I can't really sell or throw away. I mean, I could throw them away, but why throw them away? And the Z Ultra is the Z Ultra is that I don't want to depart, and the Z Ultra is that I don't want to either sell or throw out because I have because I've got. I think this has been my favorite phone of the ones I've used. It's the most inconvenient. This is the one that I never could. This is the one that I could never keep in. This is the one that I could never keep in my pocket. I always had to keep it in a bag. But I really liked it because it had so much screen estate, and it had a 1080p screen. Back then, when 1080p still counted as high end, So it came out in 2013. I bought it in 2015. It still works perfectly. Well, it even outlived my tablet. So this is one of the better phones that Sony did. The beginning of the Xperia Z line. I think it came out along with the Xperia Z1, so it has the same hardware. I got attached to this phone.
That is cool. Okay. I think it's time to move on. At least that's what Tony's telling me. All right. Let's move on to vibrations from the ether. And our first vibrations is from Brad Alexander. The Brad Alexander saga continues. Hey guys. Regarding episode 371.5, I've never been a fan of GNOME. It's not just about wanting to control theming, but as I recall, they were loath to put knobs to adjust the desktop. Their attitude, and I believe they said this in a forum, was, you don't need settings. You just need to run it the way we provide it, which is why I went with KDE. I would rather have too many knobs and switches with reasonable defaults than not enough. What do you guys think?
Well, I was just going to say, I agree with Brad with the proviso that anything above GNOME 2 I don't like. GNOME 2 was brilliant. I really love GNOME 2, and I like its spin-off, that Mate Desktop. But yeah, I can't live with GNOME 3 either. It's
I
too much
concur with you, Tone.
configuration.
Yeah. Yeah, I concur with all that. I think that I'd rather have too many knobs as well rather than not enough. But we know how GNOME can be a little, they can be a little stiff in their stance, I guess.
It's perfect for my tablet where I don't need much customization to begin with. Because ironically, the default GNOME desktop is much more usable with a touch screen than a mouse.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm looking at Ubuntu Touch with a very similar interface to the desktop environment on GNOME 40. I much prefer the Ubuntu Touch on the touch screen.
Does Ubuntu Touch use a fork of Unity? Or is it similar to Unity?
I don't know. I don't know the technology behind it.
It was originally Unity 8, and now it's been renamed Lomiri. And they have it on Manjaro too. I believe there's a version with Lomiri.
But it's that design ethos that works better on a touchscreen.
As for KDE, I've tried to use it a couple of times. Maybe the reason I didn't like it is that I didn't try to customize it enough, because I don't really what I did, it could be that what I don't like is the Breeze theme and the way, for example, the Dolphin file manager looks with Breeze. So after trying Garuda, the Dragonized edition of Garuda, I realized how much KDE Plasma can be, customized to the point where it doesn't even resemble the Plasma that threw me off at the beginning. So I should. What I really, I'm also hoping for more and more improved Wayland support for Plasma, because I really like Wayland, and if it gets to the point where it works with Wayland as well as GNOME, who knows? Maybe I will switch to Plasma on my laptop. But I'm very content with XFC on the desktop.
Okay, does somebody want to take Larry's?
Do you want me to take that?
Go for it.
Yeah. Excuse me if I fluff, because this is a long... Larry Murphy says, "Hi gang, I've heard Michael from Destination Linux and others talk so much about Plasma desktop environment that I decided to try it out. I used KDE back in the day. Less than half of the goodies worked, but what did was really nice. I downloaded every distro I could find with Plasma. I also wanted to try out Manjaro. I never liked Arch distros, but that was quite a while ago, and Linux has changed so much. I was really pleased with Manjaro and KDE, but I had one problem. My scanner didn't work. I went to Epson's website and checked the driver downloads page. What I found was that they offered a deb and RPM packages only. I figured that I could use my XP install in VirtualBox. The only problem was that it didn't recognize my USBs. Then I decided I'd use any distro with either debs or RPM. I found that there was something about every one that I didn't like or didn't work. I was about to give it up for a while until I noticed I'd never tried MX Linux. It worked great. The plasma wasn't as polished as Manjaro, but everything worked great. And there was still so many options in plasma. It'll take me years to get it all digested. I heard Ryan that an MX in one of the earlier DNL shows that he'd seemed to like a lot about it. If I like a distro well enough in VirtualBox, I burn it to a live CD, and if I still liked it, I installed it. As I said, MX works great, but I really like Manjaro better, so I started researching about Manjaro because I figured there must be a way to get the drivers for my scanner in an Arch distro, and there was. I reinstalled Manjaro, went into the AUR, and that had a whole lot of Epson drivers, so I found what I needed, and now I have 3 distros that I like very much. I've been using all 3. They all do what I want, but there are some differences. Manjaro and MX handle audio much better than Mint. Mint works well enough that I can use it, but Manjaro and MX does it even better. There are a few other things that I like as well as, but this email is long enough now. Welcome to the new co-hosts. Diversity is one of Linux's strong suits, so I like the different viewpoints from all of you. Thanks for a very interesting and helpful show. P.S. Mint was the first distro that worked best for me, and I always keep an install. As I said, I'm now using all. I am now using all 3. That was quite. Anyone got any comments on that? It's quite.
I've used all 3 of those distros. Manjaro, Mint, MX, and all of. As of this time, I still run 2 of those, MX and Mint. So.
Yeah, the only one I haven't tried is Manjaro. I've never tried Manjaro.
You haven't? Yeah.
The scanner driver seems to be a fairly common issue across the board. It seems to come up quite a lot for people.
Yeah.
Okay, and since this last one was directly to me, I'll just go ahead and take that. This is from William Wasley. Hi, Joe. On your most recent mintCast episode, you mentioned getting cloud drive syncing, e.g., Google Drive to work on Linux. I have been a user of Linux for over a decade, and while I did use the G Drive option built into GNOME, which Norbert mentioned, I have since settled on Mega.io, which works well for me on both Ubuntu and Mint and keeps my files in sync. It's the first thing I install on a new machine, and it holds copies of my .bashrc and .vimrc, fstab, and other important files. It works on my Android phone and Windows VMs too, and also comes with a liberal amount of free storage. Thanks. And yeah, I have not checked out Mega.io, and I will try and give that a look as soon as I can, because I do still have some storage out there somewhere.
It piqued my interest too.
So I wonder if it's just like G Drive, or if it does like all of them, or if it's its own thing. Looks like it might be its own thing, but yeah, that's cool. Okay, so per terabyte and month, $4.90. 1.56 per terabyte and month. It's interesting. Okay. Thank you for that, William. And yeah, okay. Do we have any comments about either one of those two?
I just went to that web page, and you can also get 20 gig of free storage, which Dropbox's free storage used to be 8 gig, I think, something like that. So
Google provides 15, right?
25.
25?
Is it?
No,
20? 15.
It's 15.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. I was looking for the free. I'm not seeing the free here.
It's on the front page, underneath the header. Secure cloud
create a
storage
mega
and
account to get
communications. Yeah,
20 gig
just
free.
underneath. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, and now we transition to check this out. And first up in our check this out, it's Fairdy. All your apps in one place. Josh, I think you put these here?
Yeah, I put this one in here. Now, I haven't given this a try personally, but Ferdy advertises itself as a messaging browser that allows you to combine your favorite messaging services into one application.
Oh, like Trinity.
It's open source. It's cross-platform, and I thought maybe if somebody was looking for a tool for something like this, maybe they could give it a try. From what I understand, it's a fork of a program called Franz. So, give it a try and let us know what you think about it.
And it says Discord, Telegram, WhatsApp, and I don't know what that one is or that one.
This looks interesting, though.
Yeah, it seems to be fairly comprehensive.
No, but I remember back in the day, Trinity was the go-to for like everybody for bringing together all your different messaging applications. It's just insane the number of messaging applications that I use every day.
Right, you have all these clients running at all times, and so something like this might help to just consolidate it all down for someone if they're looking to do that.
Does it use Electron?
I'm not sure.
You can view the
With all
code.
these services it might use. Oh, you could. Oh, there's a folder called something like Electron Builder. But at first glance, it seems like it does use Electron. But I mean, with all the services, you can't really complain, because if you wanted to use something like Discord on its own, it would use Telegram. It would use Electron anyway. And it even has Facebook Messenger, which I would be really happy to be able to remove from my phone, even though I only use the Messenger Lite app. So this could be an alternative for that too.
And Norbert, was this one yours? The gesture improvements?
Yeah, I think it's not a surprise whenever there's a GNOME whenever there's a GNOME extension in the check this out. I keep saying how much I like vanilla GNOME, but it's not pure vanilla GNOME that I use. Like I said, I like to keep the number of extensions to a minimum, but this one really caught my attention because what it does is multiple things. The most important one, at least for me, is that it implements the touchpad gestures that you would have in GNOME on Wayland to work on X11 as well, which more than anything, what it does is it proves, I think, that the GNOME devs could have implemented this if they wanted to, but I think they are trying to encourage people to move to Wayland, but it works just as flawlessly on Xorg, which is nice because a few days ago I was in a Zoom call and I wasn't able to share my screen on Wayland, so I had to log into the Xorg session. So I might just keep the X session as by default, but this way with the extension I don't have to give up on these nice gestures. And another thing it does, both on X and Wayland, it adds in extra gestures, because the way you would go into the application view on GNOME is you would have to go into the overview with the swipe up, the three fingers up, and you would have to swipe up again to go into the application grid. But with these but with the additional but with but with the extra gestures, you can just swipe down with three fingers. I set it to be three fingers, which is default, but you can set also four fingers. It goes into the application grid immediately. And if you swipe up three fingers from there, it goes back to your desktop and you can so you can move between your desktop and the application grid without ever having to go into the overview mode. And it also has secondary gestures. For example, if I swipe up and down with four fingers, which I set it to be four fingers, I can full screen an app and even move it so I can maximize it, resize it, and even make it full screen, which is so I think it's one of the most convenient extensions I've found so far. But in a way it makes me a bit sad about GNOME itself not having these features, because right after the tray icons, I think this is the second one that I would love to see implemented in GNOME itself the most. So if any of you are using GNOME, you should check this out because it's great.
Okay, now on to the announcements. Our next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, the 28th of November. And we do have a link to get it converted to your time zone. Same thing, the next live stream, 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, the 20th of November. And we have the converted to your time zone linked there as well. And in wrap up, I'm Joe, and if you want to hear more of me, I have a couple other podcasts. You can catch me at tllts.org. That's the Linux Link Tech Show, or the Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com. You can find me on MeWe, although I haven't been there much lately. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or I have a link for buying me a coffee. Tony?
Yeah, you can find me on Hacker Public Radio, host ID 338, if you want to go and listen to some of my old musings on there. I'm on Twitter, TonyH1212. I'm th@mintcast.org, and I'm on distrohoppersdigest@gmail.com.
Norbert?
You can write me an email at norbert@mintcast.org. And that's it.
The other Josh?
Well, you can find me at jt@mintcast.org. Shoot me an email there if you'd like. I'm Josh Thacker on Discord and at metal_foss on Twitter.
Which is still the greatest Twitter handle I've ever heard.
Thank you, sir.
And Nishant wasn't able to make it today. You can find him, nishant@mintcast.org. RyconGhost at Instagram, RyconGhost at GitHub, Ghost.Rycon on Discord, Maverick00783 at Steam. Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Josh Lowe for all his work on the website, Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the image, Discord, or for the animated Discord logo, and Londoner for the time sync, Norbert for the audio editing, Bytemark Hosting for hosting mintcast.org and our backup Mumble server, archive.org for hosting our audio files, HPR for, what was formerly our backup Mumble room, and the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Just pretend you can hear the music. Was it Trillion, Paul? Maybe it was Trillion. Yeah, that actually sounds right. for the application at Trinity Trillion.
Okay, stopping Audacity.
Oh yeah, we can go and do that, can't we?
All right.
Export.
Oh, Ferdy has an app image.
374. What's my name again?
What? Yeah. So I'm looking at the website for Ferdy, this messenger thing, and it even has an app image and a package for FreeBSD.
Oh, very nice.
So otherwise, it is a deb for Ubuntu and it is RPM for Fedora. I assume it will also work on Debian or OpenSUSE. But
I'm
the app
sure
image is really nice because it might be the most convenient way to use this.
that should make it nice and portable.
Yep, app image. And a snap.
Of course. I might check this app image out while I'm here. It's a healthy 138 megabytes. How is it app images seem to be smaller than Flatpaks? It's kind of it doesn't make sense.
Mine's heading to the drive folder now.
For example, I was using the app image for the LibreWolf browser, and it's 75 megabytes. And it's, I think the Flatpak, if it downloads all the dependencies it needs, is way larger. It's like hundreds of megabytes.
Did you create
Yeah,
the folder?
So
It's
Oh,
there. I'm
there it is.
uploading as well.
but someone said it could be because app images are not sandboxed than Flatpaks are. So Flatpaks have access to less of the system own packages.
All right.
Let's see how large mine ends up being. I did a lot of the talkie today. Oh, not bad.
Yeah, we did okay for a backup episode, you know?
Yeah.
Backup topic.
Well, a little over 2 hours. Not much, though. And you cut off the beginning and end, it's
by the
probably
time
under.
by the time you edit it down, it's going to be 50 minutes both shows.
Perfect.
So it was Leo's fault that the shows ran long. Quit blaming me.
Yeah, we speed through it.
Yeah.
We need to maybe set up another show where we just talk about audiobooks, since we got at least 3 people on here that listen to audiobooks.
Well, I could mostly talk about the Big Finish stuff. I haven't really been listening to much stuff lately.
Did you get a chance to listen to The Way of Kings?
Not yet, but I might decide to read it first, the book itself, and not the adaptation.
Okay.
I should try to implement some reading time into my daily schedule, just other than reading for articles for university, just some reading for myself. There's a couple of things that I really should have read by this until now. For example, the Asimov books.
I'm going through the Grim Noir books again from, what is it, Larry Correia? I think it's Larry. Let me double check. That might not be right. Correia? Yeah, Larry Correia. And they're pretty good books. There's only 3 of them though. I think next, because I think in a couple of weeks I have a whole bunch of books that are coming out. So I'm going through some of the other stuff for the things that are coming out. Like there's another Alex. I think there's another Alex Verus novel coming up pretty soon. So I'm gonna go through that series again, and that's a pretty long series actually.
Mm.
Yes. Well, I hate to run early, gents, but I have to take off.
It's not early.
All right. Well,
as soon as mine's up, I'll be going.
all right. Well, we'll see you on Saturday then.
Yeah,
Right.
you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna end the stream. Ending it now.
All right. See you, everybody.
And
Yeah.
then
Bye.
set up.